See if Anthony recognizes this next one. There it is, everybody. Thanks for joining us here live, brought to you by Toby Hockey and Amateur Sports TV, and of course NHL discussion on Instagram. Find them there. Anthony, Jacob, thanks for joining me back. Happy 21 to you, man. Unlike, you're not just playing hockey though. That's the problem, right?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a different 2021, but hopefully things can turn around in the next couple months.
It'd be nice to see announcements exactly to get you back on the ice, correct?
Yeah, no kidding.
So, without further ado, let's go at this right now. Let's talk about the last couple of weeks. We're 10, 11 games in. Let's talk about the Jets first in the back-to-back with the Flames. What do you take over the last two games, the last 125 minutes in a shootout that have been played between both teams?
Well, I think the last week or so has been a lot better for the Jets. I think early on they won a couple of games that they maybe shouldn't have. But the game against Vancouver was pretty poor, the effort. But the two games against Calgary, I think for the most part they played well. I think they should have won the game, the first of the two games, but Calgary ended up coming back, and we saw Johnny Gaudreau shootout winner. But I thought the two games in general were very good for the Jets. I liked what we saw from Laurent Brossoit in game number 2 between the pipes. It's been a bit of an odd season for Connor Hellebuyck. I feel like he's let in a bunch of pretty weak goals. The Chris Tanev one from his own blue line. There's the one where I think it was Leon Draisaitl who was sliding on his knees, and it somehow went through Hellebuyck. And so there's been a lot of weak goals, but he's also kept them in a lot of games, a lot of tight games that maybe they shouldn't have been. And so it was good to see that Brossoit is also playing very well against the Flames.
You bring up some very interesting points between both games. I mean, first off, the Jets take 2-goal leads in both. The Flames come back in both, tie the game up, take the lead. But then you see the Jets' resiliency in the third period kind of hold on to those leads or come back. You mentioned Connor Hellebuyck, up and down, all around. Is he trying to hold on to his Vezina form from last year, or is it something where he has to re-identify himself and just get used to being between the pipes still? I mean, he's only 420 minutes in, which is about 7 games. He just isn't himself. I mean, his .908 save percentage, 2.69 goals against. Yes, he's made some tremendous saves. But like you said, Chris Tanev's goal is not the prettiest thing you want to see on a top 10.
It's weird because Hellebuyck is pretty much the prime example of being focused and being prepared. You see him staring all over the ice before the game, and it's almost seems like he's just a bit rusty or a bit off, or his focus isn't quite there, which is very, very strange for Hellebuyck. He hasn't played much in the last year. Lots of times we talk about how goalies need more rest. I think it's more that Hellebuyck has some rust that he's got to scrape off, and I think in the next couple of weeks he's gonna sharpen up and stop letting in those super weak goals, because we know Hellebuyck's one of the best goaltending talents in the league, and even though he has let in those weak goals, we still see that he can steal a game like a few other goaltenders in the NHL.
So you talk about Hellebuyck and the Vezina. I want to go back because I haven't asked this question to really anybody in the last 12 months. Did he win that Vezina trophy simply on the merit of how many games, how many shots he faced, or was he the best player on the Jets and the best goaltender in the league last year?
He was not only the best player in the Jets, but he was the best goalie in the league, and I think almost any stat would agree with that. Not only that the Jets were, you just saw how he carried the Jets through how weak they were to begin the season, and that they somehow got out of that even with Hellebuyck. But every stat, when you look at how many goals he saved versus how many he was expected to save, his actual save percentage, when you look at any counting stat and you look at his workload and everything, Connor Hellebuyck was the best goalie, And I'd go out on a limb and say he was one of the best players in the league, and I think he should have gotten even more consideration for the Hart Trophy last year than he did.
Okay, so I'll leave last year aside. Let's looking over the last 10 or 11 games for these Jets. They've had a little bit of an East Coast swing. They got very lucky with Ottawa, pounding on them for the first couple of games on their first road trip. They're now in the middle of playing Calgary, which is below them as well, in the Northern Division. What is it like for a team to be playing, in your eyes, 4 games against the same opponent back to back to back to back now?
Yeah, it's something the NHL has never seen before. I mean, in recent seasons, it was even if you played back to back against a team, that was super strange. But as a fan's perspective, I really like it just because you get so familiar with the matchups, and you can see how it evolves. It's almost like a playoff series where you can see which line faces off against who. You know, when the Jets are playing Edmonton, who faces up against McDavid, who faces up against Draisaitl, and then how do they adjust? You know, do the Jets go with a more defensive line like Adam Lowry against one of the top lines of Calgary to try and unleash their big boys against someone else, or do they go best on best? So I don't know. That's one of my favorite things is you see how it evolves over these 4 games. You can already see who's becoming, you know, kind of the leading cast throughout the series. So I think it's really an interesting thing to follow when there's more than one game against a team.
The Jets certainly have had an interesting set of foes in the Kachuk brothers, Brady and Matthew. What do you take on how the Jets have responded to Matthew Kachuk's antics, for lack of a better term, considering how the season ended last year in the playoffs between Calgary and Winnipeg? And do you see any more animosity created in the next 2 games against the Flames?
No, I think the Jets have done a great job of keeping Matthew Kachuk quiet. There's been a couple of scrums where Kachuk's been jostling with other Jets players, but in terms of how he's actually played, he hasn't. I know he scored a couple of goals yesterday, but I think especially in the first game, he was very quiet. And for Kachuk, I think once he gets physically engaged and once he's throwing punches and throwing the body, I think that makes him a better player and that can make him a game changer. But when the game is dialed back a bit, I don't think he was quite as noticeable, and that's definitely a good thing for the Jets. But also, I'm not sure the Flames did bring out their best effort the last couple of games. I think their star players, I know Johnny Gaudreau was good late in the first game, but Sean Monahan, Elias Lindholm, Kachuk at times, they've all been pretty quiet. So I think the Flames, I'd expect a better Flames team from their top players the next couple of games.
So let's talk about that for a quick second. Teams that have come right out of the gate in third, fourth gear compared to teams that are slow coming out of that. I mean, we don't expect Ottawa to have, we expect them to play hard, but we know they're going to make rookie mistakes because they're a very young team. Calgary did not have the greatest of offenses last year. I mean, Johnny Gaudreau was down, 35% in his scoring last year compared to the year before. Johnny's now had a goal or an assist, a point in each game this season. Is he the only wheel that's really running in Calgary? Because I'm seeing, Dylan Dubé getting benched in the third period for the first game, and then I'm seeing him come back a little bit in the second. Sean Monahan's been non-existent, trying to fit Sam Bennett in the mix. The defense outside of Chris Tanev's 180-foot goal really hasn't affected the offense much in Calgary. What is missing in Calgary that they're just not firing on all cylinders yet?
That's a great question. I think the defense has been good, but you're right, it hasn't really led to offense. Chris Tanev's been good. Him and Noah Hannafin, I think they still haven't let in a 5-on-5 goal against all year as a pairing. I think Rasmus Anderson's really blossomed alongside Mark Giordano. I think Giordano's taken a step back, which is expected. I think he's 37 now or something like that.
He's played over 900 games too. So
yeah, so he's definitely getting some mileage on those boots. So he's starting to slow down. I think that's an effect because the Flames don't have that elite number one defenseman anymore. And I think they're also really searching for that elite number one center. Sean Monahan the last couple of seasons has proven he's not that. I think every time I've watched the Flames this season and last season, he's basically invisible. He seems slow, and I'm not sure that he's a good enough player to go alongside Johnny Gaudreau. And I same thing with Elias Lindholm. He scored a bunch last year, but the last couple of games he's been extremely quiet. And I think they need that other number one player to play alongside Johnny Gaudreau. Matthew Tkachuk has generally played on different lines than Johnny Gaudreau. I'd maybe consider putting those two together to see if they could kind of get a good 1-2 punch, because it seems like they're kind of on their own islands on those top two lines.
You're absolutely right. I mean, look at the complementary factor to Johnny Gaudreau, Johnny Hockey. He just doesn't have that next step. He doesn't have that guy going with him, like a 29 in Ottawa, or Josh Anderson and Brendan Gallagher in Montreal, which has been a fantastic duo, and how Montreal has really surged to the top of the Northern Division, which we'll get to in a second. I just want to go back to the Jets real quick. They're sitting at 15 points, a +5 in the goals for, goals against. Are you surprised that many goals have been scored against the Jets? And if not, how is it they're going to attack the defense and really tighten it up in their own end?
I've honestly been impressed with the defense compared to where I projected them going into the season. Last year was a defensive wreck on the blue line. This year I've thought things have been a lot calmer. This defense isn't dynamic, but I think what you can compare it to is the Pittsburgh Penguins team that won the Cup without Chris Letang, that one playoff run. They have a lot of role guys, no one who's really going to make a huge impact, but just kind of a play-by-committee team. I thought Morrissey really struggled to start the season. I think he's done a lot better lately, especially the 2 games against the Flames. I think he's looked a lot better. And so I think that's key for the Jets, because they need someone out of that 6 to kind of jump up and make a bigger impact. I think Neil Pionk's been better as well. I think he was pretty quiet early in the year as well. But I think some of their additions, I've liked Derek Forbert. Dylan DeMello's continued to play well since he got moved from Ottawa. Bull Hughes looked solid. Logan Stanley, I'm not the biggest fan in the world, but he's been okay. And so I'm not too concerned about the Jets' defense. I think they're playing pretty well as a committee. And considering they don't have any big names, I think that they're doing pretty well.
You mentioned Josh Morrissey having a bit of a slow start. I really like the way Logan Stanley and Nathan Beaulieu have played together. That tandem is harsh. They're physical. Beaulieu doesn't, back down. And having a guy that's 6'8", 228 beside you with a reach like that, I'm surprised how well Logan Stanley has fit in. Obviously, it's going to be a decision for the staff to include Tucker Pullman when he does come off injury. He is that number 5'6" guy that's supposed to be in the lineup, but it's hard to take out Logan Stanley. And I got to say, last night, watching those 2 former Kings players starting the scoring for the Jets was truly remarkable. I like the way Forward's playing. Yeah. I mean, he's been that guy that he was that X factor. You didn't know how he was going to fit in, but he's showing that he's got to be there, just like DeMello did last year, just like Pionk did last year when he was given that position. So it's not like you have those A-lister superstars. You've got a lot of ABs that are fitting in 1 through 4, and Morrissey's leading that, which is great. The one concern I have, though, is, having Blake Wheeler sitting at a -9 rating right now. Nick Ehlers at the other side of the pendulum, swinging a +9 on the rating, which is something he's never done before. How do you expect Blake Wheeler to assess this second line position that he's in? And do you think it's going to be something that could continue for the remainder of the season, him, Stastny, and Connor together as a line?
That's very interesting. I was going to bring up Blake Wheeler as well, because he's been on the ice for 13 of the Jets' 19 5-on-5 goals this year against. And what else did I have here? The Jets on ice goals for percentage with Wheeler on the ice is 20%. So he's only been on the ice when he's on the ice, only 20% of the goals are goals for at 5-on-5. And I'll just throw in quickly that he has been good on the power play, and the power play's done very well this season with Wheeler down low there. But he's really struggled at 5-on-5, and I think it's not only. I don't think it's much to do with luck. I don't think it's that too many goals have bounced in against him. I think he's just really struggled. And Shifley, Wheeler, and Connor together really struggled. I think they were bottom 10 in the league in goals for percentage when they're on the ice together. And so I think I'm really happy that Maurice went ahead and split up Shifley and Wheeler. Like that's something that he's really tried to refrain from doing in the past, just because Wheeler's his captain, Wheeler's his veteran, and Wheeler's been one of their best players in seasons past. But it certainly looks like there's something off with Wheeler. So he looks a lot slower. He's reaching a lot more. Doesn't seem like he's shooting the puck as well. And so Wheeler's a big concern for the Jets for sure. Whether he stays on that second line, I know we're going to talk a lot about where does Pierre-Luc Dubois fit into the Jets lineup. And so right now, I'm not really sure if there's anyone else who deserves to be bumped down out of the top six other than Wheeler, just because he's really struggled. But he is their captain, and he has been one of their best players. So do you just ride it out with him for a while and hope that things turn around, or do you maybe bump him down even further? I'm not sure.
I wouldn't bump him down further. Rather, I'd probably, be straight up with him and say, Blake, is something going on? Like, what's going on here? You're like you said, he's reaching a lot more. I've seen that a lot more in the games. I don't see him picking up that third man when he's that person that's got to be the back checker. There's been several goals, when you see that top line of Shifley, Connor, and Wheeler, that third man's just not getting picked up. I mean, even in last night's game, Tkachuk's back door, that's the third guy. That's the first man coming back in the zone. That's something you learn as a 12-year-old, whether you're playing A, AA, or AAA hockey. Pick up the third man. And Matt Tkachuk's not a fast guy. Blake Wheeler's a pretty fast guy. He should be able to hang on to him. Yet he lets him slip because he moves to the front post instead of following him to the back post. And I'm only picking on that because I saw that definitively last night. And I see it consistently in those three players. They're not known for their defensive prowess. They're not going to be playing defensive hockey, those three, 55, 81, and 26. So splitting them up gives them an opportunity to see where other line mates can potentially help out in the defensive zone. I do agree keeping on the second line with Stastny and Connor. And on the power play, before we get to PLD, that power play looks a lot more running through 4 or 5 players, where 4 or 5 players have a chance to take a shot on net versus always trying to set up 29 in number 8's kitchen. And I know 29 didn't get a point last night for his new team, but that power play is looking a whole lot more effective now with those 5 players compared to what it was in previous years.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think adding Kyle Connor as that main shooting option is great, just because he kind of has more tools in the toolkit. I think Laine was always just taking that big one-timer, but Connor has a lot more. He's dangerous from a lot more spots and with a lot of different shots. And so I like that. I think having Wheeler down low and kind of playing the power play through him at times is good. But I think, as we talked about how teams adjust throughout a series, especially against the Oilers, I saw Darnell Nurse. He really took away that Wheeler option and that Wheeler pass as they got into the second game against the Oilers. And so I'm certainly concerned that that's going to be a factor. And so they'll have to find other plays to make as well, rather than relying on that Wheeler pass. But overall, the power plays look great. I've liked Josh Morris. He's looked better on the power play when he's been on PP1. I think the puck movement in general has been very good for the Jets power play.
Yeah, Morrissey or Pionk at the top works well. I want to throw a quick wrinkle at you. You're playing head coach Maurice's spot for about 25 seconds here. Would you switch Wheeler and Stastny's position on the power play?
I like how it is right now. I think I'd probably keep it as it is. I like Stastny where he is, but he's also very good at moving the puck. So I don't know. I'd keep it as it is right now. But if teams continue to pick on Wheeler and keep shutting him down from that spot, then maybe I'd make a change.
I just see Blake Wheeler having more of an active stick for a potential tip-in, whereas Stastny's that guy that's just, he's stationed. I just find that center spot too stationary.
Yeah.
And there has to be a rotation in it somewhere, not necessarily a circling in the offensive zone where you're trying to just maintain control. Rather, it just has to be motion up and down in that slot. I just think he's just too stationary, and I think Wheeler would provide that opportunity to change the angle and maybe move Connor in a different way off the backside. Just my thoughts. Just going to leave it out there.
I'd also wouldn't mind seeing Kopp or Ehlers get thrown into the mix in the power play just because they bring different elements. And you're right about the stationary. Wheeler's definitely slowed down. Stasny's slowed down. And so if you could get Kopp in there every once in a while to wreak havoc in front of the net, or Ehlers just because of his flat out speed, I think that could definitely bring a different element to the power play if it starts getting stagnant at some point.
How impressive has Adam Lowry been in the first 10, 11 games, knowing that his dad's behind the bench, he's getting an extra foot maybe perhaps of, pick up your game sort of son.
I think he's has he tied or already surpassed his point total from
He's at
last
4 goals, so he's tied right now with the number of goals he had all of last year.
Yeah.
Playing time's a little bit higher because he's been playing more third as opposed to fourth, but he has just a little more confidence, I think, on the ice. After scoring those goals, he's bumping better. He's moving to the net. He's stopping in front of the net. He's not circling the wagons.
And I love how he's played with Mason Appleton. I think Appleton's probably been the biggest standout or breakout player for the Jets, perhaps, like in that bottom six of someone who last year were we even sure if Mason Appleton's a regular NHL player. And now all of a sudden he's solidified himself as a good third line option. I've noticed him every night making a difference with his speed, making a difference. He kind of came into the league as an offensive player, but he's been good defensively. He's been picking off plays and making an impact with Adam Lowry, who's been excellent this season, using his big frame, going to the net, doing all the little things that Adam Lowry has always done. And it's turned into some offensive production so far this season.
Okay, let's get to the big question at hand because we've been waiting almost 14 days for this. Laine and Roslovic stepped on the ice for the first time for Columbus. We're hoping to see PLD in a number 13 jersey this week, correct?
Yeah, I think they're hoping for next Tuesday against Calgary.
Okay. So he enters the lineup. Who leaves the lineup? My thoughts are perhaps Jansen Harkins, or I don't want to say another name, but I might say Lewis, but I like the way Lewis is playing on that fourth line. He's gritty, he's grindy. Jansen's a bigger body, he skates fast. But who do you think has to leave the lineup to bring in a spot for Dubois?
Yeah, so I think you bump someone. I would love to see Andrew Kopp stay on the top line. I think him, Scheifele, and Ehlers, for right now at least, are playing extremely well. I've seen Scheifele, especially last night. I think he's was complemented a lot better with the speed of Ehlers, and you saw what Andrew Kopp did on the forecheck for one of the Jets' goals to win a battle, get it to the point, and then they scored a goal from there. And so I kind of compare Andrew Kopp to someone like Zach Hyman on the Leafs, kind of like the forechecker who I think could really complement the Jets' top players very well. So I'd really like to see Andrew Kopp stay with Scheifele and Ehlers. I think Connor and Wheeler are pretty much locks on the second line. I think you have to keep Pierre-Luc Dubois in the top six. So in that case, do you move Paul Stastny down? I think he's been good this season. I don't think he's been great. But also, do you want him on a third line with Lowry and Appleton? I'm not sure that his skill set really complements them as well. But maybe you continue to get that line some more offense. And then at that point, you're going to bump down Matthew Perreault to the fourth line. Trevor Lewis has been pretty quiet, but I like what he brings. I like the physicality. I like the effort. I like the experience, especially when it comes to playoff time or potential playoff time that Trevor Lewis brings. So I like to keep him in the lineup. I'd also like to keep Jansen Harkins in the lineup. I think if you get a Perreault, Harkins, Lewis fourth line, I'm not really sure who's going to center that. But I think they all bring grit. I think they all bring a good work ethic, even though Perreault's, there's definitely some mixed opinions on what Matthew Perreault is at this point. But he definitely still brings that effort So I'd say at that point, that's pretty much your lineup. I would move Vesalainen out of the lineup right now, or Nate Thompson when he's back. So that's probably what I do with the Jets lineup. What are you thinking?
Well, it's funny you leave Lowry on the wing, and he's a
Well,
natural center,
I,
and
I
that's like you've got five centermen that you could really play there, right? Like out of the four spots,
yeah,
and the top three positions, like you talk, Scheifele, Dubois, and Stastny. That's the best down the middle I can think of. Top three, at least in the Northern, if not the entire NHL. And you throw Lowry in there as a fourth, that is solid. I mean, you want to talk about depth and strength down the middle. There it is. In terms of talent, in terms of goal scoring, defensive, it's a little bit weaker in the top two, but I mean, those top two lines are meant to score. I really would like to see what chemistry is available for. I mean, I don't want to see Ehlers move. I like how the Jets have kept their winger pairings together. You know, they got Ehlers and Kopp together. Now you can put Ehlers, Kopp, and Lowry together, perhaps. You could put Scheifele with Kopp and Ehlers, which is current now. I like how Connor and Wheeler are staying together. Vesalainen, I mean, he's playing decent. He's not playing decent minutes. He's only playing about 7.5 minutes a game, 8 minutes a game. So I think him and Harkins and Perot can be those 3-4 guys. And Nate Thompson, when he gets healthy, he's got to get back in the lineup because he's a very similar player to that grit and grind of what Lewis brings to the table. It's going to be interesting to see how well or how many minutes they give Pierre-Luc Dubois to start off this first week or so with the Jets. I would like to see him play his natural center position, but you're going to have to start building chemistry fast because you're already going to be 35 games left. And it's similar to a little bit longer than a trade deadline per se. And teams need to figure this out soon. I
I
really
think
would like to see Dubois play with Wheeler and Connor. I think that would be a great line. Speed up the middle. It takes a bit of the pressure away from Wheeler to be that deep down defensive player because he's not been that person, obviously, with that -9 rating. And it could spring Kyle Connor and Wheeler to be more offensive. Dubois could be that trailer in that third offensive side. I really think that's where he's going to fit up eventually. And I think, you're going to throw – and Stastny could play the wing with Scheifele too. I don't – like it's just there's so many moving parts there. Until we see what chemistry develops between Pierre-Luc Dubois and two forwards, you're then going to see the rest of the top 9 forwards, 12 forwards really come to shape. Do I answer your question, Anthony? No. But I look forward to seeing how you and the boys at NHL.discussion on Instagram really think about this because there are so many ideas that are going on with this and endless possibilities. Wouldn't you agree?
yeah, I think right now you have to keep Lowry at third line center just because of how well he's played. So I think maybe you move Stastny to the wing on the third line with Lowry and Appleton. I think Pierre-Luc Dubois has to play center. He was Columbus's #1 center. I think people are, because of how well the Jets' offense has played lately, are somewhat discounting Pierre-Luc Dubois and thinking, oh, maybe he can move to the third line or he can move to the wing. PLD is a very, very good player, and he's going to be one of the Jets' top 2 centers right away, and that's a given. And so it's a great problem to have for the Jets because I'd certainly rather be talking about who's going to be bumped down rather than, who's going to be the guy who we have to bring up and play on the top line, even though he's not fit for the bill.
You bring up a valid point there, especially when it comes to the top 2 centers. Are the Jets now considered, line 1A, line 1B scenario now that PLD will be in that second center or first center spot? I mean, they're interchangeable. I mean, you've got 6 really good forwards, offensive forwards. Each line now has a defensive threat to cover that back door, and all 3 forwards want to jump in the offense. So, I agree. I mean, it's going to be or my question to you is that do you see them being a 1A, 1B scoring scenario and not intertwining those 2 top lines?
So I saw on Twitter and even by some other people the last week or two, I think Scheifele's kind of quieted this crowd the last while, but there's people who were asking, is Mark Scheifele actually a number one center? And I think the last week he's definitely turned it on again and shown that he is. But I think you're right to saying that it is a 1A, 1B, because Pierre-Luc Dubois is an excellent player. You'll see that he's a heavy player. He's a good defensive player. Can score goals. I know he's not going to score as many goals as Patrick Laine, but he still chips in offensively. And I like how if you've Kyle Connor with Pierre-Luc Dubois, that really has two. If you can have Ehlers and Scheifele, Ehlers keeps up his play, and then you have Connor and Dubois together. That is two great duos together. And I think the NHL is really headed towards all the top teams have two great lines. Almost all the good teams in Canada have two great lines. The Canadians have pretty much four great lines, but none of them that are they don't necessarily have the stars of someone like Edmonton, who has their 1A, 1B. Toronto has Tavares and Matthews line 1A, 1B, and it goes on and on and on. And so I'm fine with if there's, you see who's the better line on a given night, and if you give them more ice time, I'm happy with that. I'm happier if you don't have to rely on one line to carry your team every night, and definitely Pierre-Luc Dubois gives them an option to have another top line.
Do you put PLD on a power play, and if so, which one?
Well, we're talking about Stasny and that he's perhaps a bit stagnant on that on PP1. I'd perhaps put Dubois there. He's someone who is probably more of a middle guy or in front of the net guy rather than a running the power play through him type guy. So I think he is going to fit in there at some point. Maybe in the slot. Maybe they change things up so that there's more of a net front presence with Dubois involved. Maybe not right off the bat. Maybe he starts on PP2, but he's one of their best players, and he'll be on PP1 eventually.
Eventually, I agree, yes. He is that Leaf killer, according to what happened in the playoffs last year. Your team, let's talk about the rest of the Northern teams. We touched on Calgary a bit. How surprised are you seeing Montreal leading Toronto, or them going back and forth in the points lead in the Northern Division?
Yeah, I think people thought maybe Montreal could improved a lot this offseason, but it's clear that they really did, and people criticized them adding Josh Anderson and Tyler Toffoli as guys who are they really difference makers. Well, right now Tyler Toffoli leads the league in goals, and right now Jeff Petrie leads all defensemen in points. Now I think it's definitely going to fall back down to earth. You look at Jeff Petrie isn't going to lead all defensemen in points all season long, and Tyler Toffoli's not going to lead the league in goals. And you look at advanced stats that say that they're going to come back down to earth. But I think this is a team that plays very good as a group. I love what Brendan Gallagher brings. You have three great centers in Philip Deneau. Nick Suzuki's put things to another level. Jesperi Kotkaniemi has finally showed why he was the third overall pick. I think up and down that lineup, everyone works hard. Everyone chips in offensively. The blue lines look good. I think rookie defenseman Alexander Romanov has been very good for them. Carey Price and Jake Allen haven't been terrific, but they haven't needed to be so far. And so at a certain point, this isn't a team with extreme firepower up front. So at some point, things are going to get a little tighter offensively, and they're going to need to rely on Shea Weber, Jeff Petrie, Carey Price more than they have so far. But right now, they're definitely running away with the North Division along with Toronto.
No doubt. Before we move to Toronto, I mean, like you said, 9 goals, 4 assists for Tyler Toffoli, leading in the NHL in goals. Jeff Petrie, you wouldn't expect him to be leading the league in defensive scoring. Definitely that ship will set sail and come back to a bit of normal waters. How happy is Brendan Gallagher? He smiles all the time. He's got to be smiling even bigger, but more so with how Marc Bergevin put this team together, adding the grit and Josh Anderson and getting rid of the, lack of a better term, the pretty boy Ty Domi's son Max Domi to Columbus, because there was clearly some, emotional discourse between those superstars or some of the superstars in that dressing room.
Yeah, I think bringing in Josh Anderson was giant, and I've always loved what he brought to the Blue Jackets. I think whenever he's played against the Jets or against the Leafs, he's always been a factor. I know he's been injured a lot, and last year he had a brutal offensive season, but he's come in and he's fit in perfectly in a Canadiens team that is so deep up and down. And Nick Suzuki has already shown that he's an elite offensive player. Um, and so this team just has so many weapons, and everyone tries hard. And they kind of remind me of two different teams from the last couple of years. The New York Islanders, I think they're even better than the Islanders have been the last couple of years in terms of they play by the system, they play as a group, and unsung heroes always seem to come out from that team. And same with the Dallas Stars from that made it to the Stanley Cup final last year. Their team, a gritty team that, bottom six guys are making an effort and making a difference game in, game out. They're relying on their defense. They're getting solid goaltending, and the Canadiens are looking like that workhorse team.
Let's head it to Torontoville, and let's really figure this out, because I've said all along, Toronto's firepower and their philosophy is simply saying, if we get 3 or 4 goals scored against us and Anderson's not having a great game, we got to score 5 or 6. And that's what they've been doing for the first couple of weeks of this season. I mean, not the heaviest offensive games, a little bit of struggle, but we're seeing Marner and Tavares and Austin Matthews lead this team, and Zach Hyman's pulling up the reins a little bit as well. Do you see the Leafs finishing higher than the Jets this year? They've only played one game against each other, which means they got 9 more to go. It's going to be a fun tilt, but where do you see the pecking order in supremacy in this Northern Division? And include your Leafs, please.
Yeah, so I think the Habs are going to come down to earth a bit, and I think that's going to create a bit of a separation between them and the Leafs, who I have at number 1 right now. And I think their defense has been better this year. I think Anderson's been more of the problem when it comes to how many goals are scored against. I think they have 2 great pairs now in Morgan Riley and TJ Brody. And then you have Jake Muzzin and Justin Hall, who have both been excellent defensively for the Leafs so far. And then you throw in that Rasmus Sandin and Travis Dermott are having a tough time cracking that D-core. I think sometimes there's breakdowns, but I think the group overall is pretty solid. I think Anderson struggled at times. I think they've had quite a few injuries in their bottom 6. They've lost Joe Thornton. They've lost Nick Robertson. They've recently lost Alex Kerfoot for the time being. And I think that's definitely tested who's going to step up in that bottom 6. I know the Leafs are kind of in a situation where with so much money tied to Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, that every offseason they're kind of going into the bargain bin and finding guys like Jimmy Vesey, like Jason Spezza, like Nick Patan, who they hope can somehow resurrect their careers and provide some offense for the Leafs. I think Wayne Simmons has done that recently. He's brought that grit factor that the Leafs need. He's produced on the power play and in front of the net like we used to see from him when he used to play for the Flyers. So right now I have the Leafs ahead of the Habs, and then after that I think you have to have the Jets number 3. I don't think the Canucks have shown enough. Elias Pettersson hasn't looked himself. I don't like that defense. I don't like their goaltending as much as I did when they had Jacob Markstrom. I thought I was going to like the Flames more than I have with Jacob Markstrom in net, but it doesn't seem like they have the players who are stepping up besides Johnny Gaudreau to produce for them. The Oilers, I mean, they're a mess after McDavid and Draisaitl. They don't scare me very much. And then the Senators are the Senators. They're a young team who every once in a while they might give a team a scare, but they should be an easy victory. So I have Leafs number 1, I have Habs 2, I have Jets 3. and then I have the other teams kind of a step behind them.
You bring up the threat of McDavid and Draisaitl in Edmonton. I agree. Not much. You can add Nugent Hopkins and Yamamoto if you want
Yeah.
to. I mean, they've got decent offense, but like that, the back end of that Oiler team did not represent well, nor had it improved over the offseason. I don't think it's there. I wanted to touch base with you real quick. I mean, speaking of the Oilers, Tyson Barrie goes to Edmonton. He's supposed to be their offensive push on the defense. He's not getting much power play time. He looks average at best. And the Leafs were able to replace him with a more physical, more effective TJ Brody. And I think the Leafs definitely did the right thing by parting ways with Barrie and bringing in another B-liner in Brody.
Yeah, I don't understand that addition at all for the Oilers, especially with Oscar Klefbom gone for the year. They thought, oh, they need somebody to replace Klefbom. Well, Tyson Barrie's not that guy. He's an offensive guy, but you go up and down this blue line. They're almost all offensive guys who struggle defensively. Darnell Nurse is a good skater, but he's struggled defensively. Ethan Bear, great offensive player, but he's still super young and has his defensive lapses. I like Caleb Jones, who's been in and out of their lineup, but again, he's young and has defensive problems. And so I don't think Tyson Barrie was a very good fit for this team. Tyson Barrie. Definitely adding someone like TJ Brody would have been a lot more effective just because he's good in all areas of the game. And even Brody's had some ups and downs so far this year, but you just have that steadying presence every single night that you don't get from Tyson Barrie, who the Oilers' power play was not great last year. It wasn't great to start this year either. And yeah, it's just a puzzling addition for the Oilers that I don't think they needed.
We've definitely focused on the Northern Division here all show. Thanks for watching here on Lightin the Lamp, episode 1. I got to ask you, goal of the year so far, does that go to Connor McDavid?
I think he's had a couple. The one where he turned Scheifele inside out, and then the one against the Leafs the other night as well. I think either one of those could easily be a goal of the year so far.
Okay. What about on your Insta page, you were mentioning about Cale Makar. What has impressed you so much that he hasn't had that sophomore or junior jinx yet?
He's been, in my opinion, the best defenseman in the league. He is just so great, such a great skater. Not only just his quickness, but how he moves himself on the blue line. There's a clip that I haven't posted yet, but I'm planning on posting sometime this afternoon where he completely breaks the ankles of, I forget I guess the Wild they were playing again last night, and then makes a backdoor pass on the blue line. But his mobility, his four-way mobility to get away from pressure, to make a difference in the offensive zone. But he's also defended very well as well. So right now, I know he's just in his second season, but Cale Makar looks so calm, so confident, and he's making an impact all over the ice right now.
No doubt. I'm going to give you 4 players that are not in lineups right now. Anthony, you tell me which team is missing the most. Are you ready?
Okay.
Pasternak in Boston, Kucherov in Tampa, Johnny Taves in Chicago, Matt Dumba in Minnesota.
Okay, well, I guess Pasternak just came back. I think he's played 2 games now. Matt Dumba in Minnesota. That's an interesting one because the Wild, I don't think they're a very great team. Kirill Kaprizov has been great in his rookie season. I like Spurgeon and Brodin on that back end, but they're in a weak division. And so I think they have a great opportunity to make the playoffs because they're competing. I think they have Arizona. They're in the Pacific Division with Arizona, Anaheim, LA, San Jose, who are all bad teams, and so they have a great opportunity to make the playoffs. So I think they're definitely missing Matt Dumba, and although he may not be the best defender, he's someone who can produce offense from the blue line. And when you look at what they're missing up front for offense, I think Dumba could definitely help them with that. So I think the Blackhawks aren't a great team this year, and Or actually, they're a very bad team this year, and so I don't think having Jonathan Taves would help that very much. They're missing a lot of pieces. So I'm going to go with Matt Dumba for the team that's missing him the most.
I agree with you there because I mentioned Kucherov, but Tampa Bay hasn't missed a beat.
Yeah.
And I could have also thrown in Tarasenko with the Blues, but again, the Blues are doing very well in that very weak Pacific Division. I mean, you really think about it, the California teams in Arizona are fighting for the bottom 4 spots.
Yeah.
It's not like any of them are really wanting to be in the top 3 or 4. And St. Louis, Minnesota, and Colorado certainly have the upper edge to being those
and
top
Vegas.
3s.
And Vegas is in that.
Oh, and Vegas too. I mean, you can throw Vegas in there as well. I forget there's 8 teams, not 7. So, yeah, I mean, those 4 teams are going to be pushing, and the other 4 are just going to be, okay, who wants to finish 5th? Because right now they're not showing anything.
But I think you throw Minnesota in any other division there, and they're probably not a playoff team.
Oh, they're hooped, absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you think? Last question before I let you go tonight, Anthony. You have a lot of different metrics you've worked with, and one that I was particularly interested in is how you ranked the teams prior to the season. And you mentioned having the Jets not as high as you would have thought. I think they were number 17 or number 19 based on an evolution site you had going on.
Yeah, I wasn't too high on the Jets, just mostly because of their defense, and I wasn't convinced that they were going to be able to hold things up. They've done that so far, and certainly Ehlers, Kopp, and Lowry have broken out big time, and I think that's a big reason why the Jets have kind of been bumped up my rankings into. I'd say they're probably around the 10 mark now in terms of where I'd rank them, and so I think breakout performances from those 3 players and solidifying the defense, knowing what you're going to get every night from that defense corps is huge, and that's why I'd have them a bit higher than I did back then. They were a team that definitely, I think, outperformed what was expected of them last year, and that's what I saw in the statistics, is that if Connor Hellebuyck has a worse season, or if he wasn't elite last year, that the Jets probably aren't in the playoffs. And so I didn't account for that Kopp and Lowry were going to have such great seasons so far, and that we'd have a good defense. So anyways, that's just kind of how things have changed from how I saw it at the start of the year.
No doubt it's going to change some more if the next time we chat, Anthony. We're going to talk more about the lower 3 divisions in the United States, how it's been breaking out for those teams, as well as look at the North between our first episode and our second episode. As always, I'd like to touch on the NHL.discussion on Instagram. Great stories, great content, trade rumors, all that jazz. Find them on Instagram, like them, follow them. What have you got coming up this next week that's going to be intriguing for listeners or intriguing for followers?
I think I'm going to dive deeper into some more award rankings. I did some Norris Trophy rankings yesterday. I know it's only 10 games into the year, but I think it's still very interesting to see who's really outperformed what was expected out of them in such a young season. So I think we might see something like that for the Hart Trophy, maybe for the Vezina, maybe even for the Calder. And of course, we'll continue to pump out highlights every night for the next week.
Look forward to seeing them as always. Anthony Jacob with at NHL.discussion on Instagram. My name is Theo Tetkulak here. Thanks for watching the first episode, Lightin the Lamp. We're going to do it again real soon, Anthony, right?
For sure.
Absolutely. Great to talk hockey with you again. I just wish we could talk a little bit more about your hockey, even though it wasn't around, and I do understand. Stay safe, everybody. Take care of yourselves and be well. Enjoy each other as best you can. Thanks for watching. Lightin the Lamp. We'll hear from you soon. Take care. Say goodbye, Anthony.
See you later.
Peace out.